Son Doom Cave found in Vietnam. It's one of the largest ever discovered cave systems. It's about 6 miles long, but it's about 38.5 million cubic meters tall, so it can fit an Empire State Building. The people who discovered this said it was like going into like an Avatar-like world with giant stalactites that are over 80 meters high. And it has its own ecosystem, okay? It's a rainforest. So it has its own weather and a mysterious underground river. They don't know where the river ends and where it runs to. This magical place is just one of the many cave systems that are in this earth and on this earth. Experts think that there are like millions of undiscovered caves on the earth, that many of them, while can be entered from the earth's surface, there are many that can't. Many of these cave systems have different ecosystems, have different temperatures, and even different atmospheres. And what if I told you that maybe some of them have other beings in them, including ancient societies? Welcome to the Hollow Earth series. This series is 6 months in the making. I pulled together every piece of information that I could find to help you understand how the earth could actually be designed, and to introduce you to ancient societies that are allegedly living in the earth as we speak. One thing I want you to remember is that we don't live on earth. We too live in earth because we're in her atmosphere. But earth is not void. Everywhere there is space, there is life. So there may be beings existing within the earth, and I may be able to prove it to you. All show notes have sources. We've got a lot to cover. Let's go. If you're watching this on TikTok, obviously it's going to be in many parts. Whole thing's going up on YouTube at once. I want to really deep dive into this. We're going to cover all theories that we've heard about the pole shifting and things like that. It really does kind of pull it all together magically. Part 1. As above, so below. I'm going to prove to you that the earth is not what you think it is, and that everything thus far that we know about the earth is mostly theorized, okay? So let's get into what I mean. First of all, we don't know jack shit about the earth. We've never put a stick down to get to the core. We can't do that. We theorize the depth. We just discovered an ocean. And we don't even have like a real picture of Earth that you see on Google Earth. That's not the real picture. That's a digital version of what Earth looks like. I'm going to give you an example. Did you know that Earth had a bald spot? The difference between the northern hemisphere and the southern hemisphere is that one of them is called the water hemisphere. What? Exactly. So, think of it like this. There is 6% dry land on Earth, 5% polar ice caps, and the rest of it is water. The northern hemisphere is a large area that is covered with land, more land than water, so it's called the land hemisphere. While the southern hemisphere is a large area that is covered mostly by water. So it's not like these different countries and land pieces are around the earth, like centered around the earth like we have it in Google Earth, where they're just spaced out. They're really chunked together, and then there's a bald spot. Just like another layer of something you would have never known because no one told. So you kind of have to remember, everything is a theory. Around the time that the idea that the earth had all of these different layers and these different crusts, that theory was being presented. There was a theory presented that the earth was hollow. And it's not hollow like you think. It's not like it's just an outside surface and the inside is completely blank. And that's where we're going to go next. And this is what I mean with as above, so below. But let's look at who theorized this concept. In 1920, a book written by Marshall Gardner was published, and it was called A Journey to the Earth's Interior, or Have the Poles Really Been Discovered? In this book, he claimed that the earth was hollow, with opening at the poles, and that its interior and in its interior lives a vast population of millions of inhabitants composing of an advanced civilization. But that's not all he theorized. I found this book online and we're going to go over some of the major components, okay? First of all, you got to know that this is around the time that these other theories are being proposed. And he is basing his theory on the same concept that makes sense to me. And it's the idea that everything that evolves on Earth, no matter if it's a seed or a baby or just the Earth in itself, we know it started from, they all start from singular points that expand out. So this idea is that everything has a nucleus at its center, a power center, a sun, and then on top of that sits all of the other components that make up that organism, and Earth is a living organism. Remember, as above, so below. Now, what he's saying is that it's not that dense. And where this theory also makes sense is the idea that everything is 99% space, 1% matter. The universe, 99% space, 1% matter. Atoms, 99% space, 1% atom. Human, 99% space, 1% matter, right? Earth, 99% space, 1% matter. And how this makes sense is if you could consider the Big Bang kind of like a big implosion, not an explosion, and that it's like a bubbling thing that like a circle started as one and then more circles entered the circle, starting from the center and expanding out with more bubbles coming up like a bubble, and those tiny little bubbles could kind of be like the crevices of Earth. Everything is like this. It's kind of like fascia in the human body where, you know, we have these parts that are filled in and we have these parts that are not. Or even just like the eye, just how things have evolved are inside out, and it doesn't have to be completely solid. The Earth isn't hollow, it's like cheese. It's got pockets and tunnels and places that you can reach from the surface and places you may not be able to reach otherwise. Now, what makes his theory so wild is that he bases his concept on the North and the South poles being open based on the idea that Mars is the same way. What do I mean? I never even knew that this was a thing, but these are photos from Mars in 1920 and there's a hole at the top. Now, I've watched many shows about the hollow Earth to get ready for this, and I did not put it really, I'll put them in the show notes, but I didn't put any clips in here. It's from the Gaia Network. I watched this show with these two guys. I'll have the name here because I can't think of it right now. But he talks about the poles in this same way, and this is very current in the 2000s, this Admiral does. And he says that not only are these poles open at both ends, and they're not aligned like you think, okay? But they're both open. And they filter the water of Earth like a filtration system where everything is coming from the inside to the outside, kind of like a torus field. That's why this makes so much sense. Not only that, but he said that the aurora borealis is not produced in the way that we originally thought. It is produced based on the exiting heat coming from the inside of the poles, because as you open up the Earth, obviously it's warmer on the inside, escaping and affecting the atmosphere. Now you can pause and read here, but he even theorizes that this nucleus center is what some will call, you'll find out later in this series, the eternal sun. It's a power center. It's the power source of Earth and our magnetic field, all right? And that it has its own glow. So there are civilizations, he says, that can live in Earth because it has its own sun, and that while it doesn't give off heat like our sun gives off heat because the way that our sun handles the atmosphere, it has its own form of radiant heat that actually grows things better and is like healthier for mankind. That's just the beginning of these theories. Now, this is the end of this section. The next section, we're going to get to actual eyewitness accounts. This guy is just theorizing real well. Part 2, eyewitness testimonies. Now, before I get into this part, when we discover the hollow earth, we are going to be talking about two major components. We're going to be talking about the poles and the land surrounding the poles. And then we're going to go talk about going into this interdimensional space that is beyond the poles. Okay, don't get confused. The first two accounts are people who have been to this territory around Antarctica that they claim does not look like what our researchers say that it looked like. But Admiral Byrd's account, which we obviously have in here, is the greatest account, where he visited the Agartha network. And we have to talk about that because we have more to say about that as well. Our first eyewitness account was made by Lieutenant Commander David Bunger, who was at the controls of 6 large transport planes used by Admiral Byrd. He worked with Admiral Byrd for the U.S. Navy's Operation High Jump that went from 1946 to 1947. Bunger was flying inland from the Shackleton Ice Shelf near Queen Mary Coast on Wilkes Land. He and his crew were about 4 miles from the coastline where open waters lies. The land Bunger discovered was ice-free. The lakes were of many different colors, ranging from rusty red, green to deep blue. Each of the lakes were more than 3 miles long. The water was warmer than the oceans, as Bunger found by landing his seaplane on one of the lakes. Each lake had a gently sloping beach. Around the 4 edges of the oasis, which was roughly square in shape, Bunger saw endless and eternal white snow and ice. 2 sides of the oasis rose nearly 100 feet high and consisted of a great ice wall. The other 2 sides had more of a gradual and gentle slope. The existing of such an oasis in the far Antarctic, a land of perpetual ice, would indicate warmer conditions there, which would exist if the oasis was in the south polar opening, leading to the warmer interior of the earth, as was the case with the warmer territory with lands and lakes that Admiral Byrd discovered beyond the North Pole, which was probably within the north polar opening. Otherwise, one cannot explain the existence of such an oasis, unfrozen territory in the midst of the continent of Antarctica with ice miles thick. It could not result from volcanic activity because below the Earth's surface, for since the land area of the oasis was covered by 300 square miles, it was too big to be affected by volcanic heat. Warm wind currents from the Earth's interior are a better explanation. So him and Admiral Byrd, who we'll learn about later, made the same discovery of these warm areas. So this next eyewitness account comes from Dr. Neffy Cottom of Los Angeles. And they reported that one of their patients, a man of Nordic descent, told them the following story. I live near the Arctic Circle in Norway. One summer, my friend and I made our minds to take a boat trip together and go as far as we could into the North Country. So we put 1 month's food provisions in a small fishing boat, and with the sail and also a good engine in our boat, we set to sea. At the end of the month, we had traveled far into the north, beyond the pole, and into a strange new country. We were much astonished at the weather there. Warm, and at times at night it was almost too warm to sleep. Arctic explorers were penetrated into the far north have made the same similar reports, okay? Then we saw something so strange that we both were astonished. Ahead of the warm open sea, we were on what looked like a great mountain. Into that mountain, at a certain point, the ocean seemed to be emptying. Mystified, we continued in that direction and found ourselves sailing into a vast canyon leading into the interior of the earth. We kept sailing, and then we saw what surprised us. A sun shining inside the earth. The ocean that had carried us into the hollow interior of the earth gradually became a river. The river led, as we came to realize later, all through the inner surface of the world from one end to the other. It can take you, if you follow it long enough, from the North Pole clear through to the South Pole. We saw that the inner surface of the earth was divided, as the other one is, into both land and water. There is plenty of sunshine in both animals and vegetables. Life abounds there. We sailed further and further into the fantastic country. Fantastic because everything was huge in size as compared with things on the outside. Plants are big, trees gigantic, and finally we came to giants. They were dwelling in homes and towns, just as we do on the Earth's surface, and they used a type of electrical conveyance like a monorail car to transport people. It ran along the river's edge from town to town. Several of the inner Earth's inhabitants, huge giants, detected our boat on the river and were quite amazed. They were, however, quite friendly. We were invited to dine with them in their homes, and so my companion and I separated, he going with one giant to the giant's home, and I going with another giant to his home. My gigantic friend brought me home to his family, and I was completely dismayed to see the huge size of all the objects in his home. The dinner table was colossal. A plate was put before me and filled with a portion of food so big it could have fed me abundantly an entire week. The giant offered me a cluster of grapes, and each grape was as big as one of our peaches. I tasted one, and I found it far sweeter than any I had ever tasted outside. In the interior of the earth, all the fruits and vegetables taste far better and more flavorsome than those we have on the outer surface of the earth. We stayed with the giant for 1 year, enjoying their companionship as much as they enjoyed knowing us. We observed many strange and unusual things during our visit with the remarkable people, and we were continually amazed at the scientific progress and inventions. All of this time, they were never unfriendly to us, and we were allowed to return to our home in the same manner in which we came. In fact, courteously offered their protection if we should need it for the return voyage. These giants were evidently members of the antediluvian race of Atlanteans who established residence in the Earth's interior prior to the historic deluge that submerged their Atlantic continent. We're going to get more to that later. A similar experience of a visit to the hollow interior of the earth through the polar opening and entirely independent was made by another Norwegian named Olaf Janssen and recorded in the book The Smokey God, written by Willis George Emerson, an American writer. The book is based on a report made by Janssen to Mr. Emerson before his death, describing his real experience of visiting the interior of the earth and its inhabitants. The earth, which being smaller and less brilliant than our sun, appears as smoky, describing his real experience of visiting the interior of the earth and its inhabitants. The title, The Smokey God, refers to the central sun nucleus in the hollow interior of the earth, which being smaller and less brilliant than our sun, appears as smoky. The book relates the true experience of a North's father and son who, with their small fishing boat and unbounded courage, attempted to find the land beyond the north wind, as they had heard of its warmth and beauty. An extraordinary windstorm carried them most of the distance, through the polar opening into the hollow interior of the earth. They spent 2 years there and returned through the south polar opening. The father lost his life when an iceberg broke in two and destroyed the boat. The son was rescued and subsequently spent 24 years in prison for insanity as a result of telling the story of his experience to incredulous people. When he was finally released, he told the story to no one. After 26 years as a fisherman, he saved enough money to come to the United States and settled in Illinois and later in California. In his 90s, by accident, the novelist Willis George Emerson befriended him and was told the story. On the old man's death, he relinquished the maps that he had made of the interior of the earth and the manuscript describing his experience. He refused to show it to anyone while he was alive, due to literally being put in the insane asylum. Now, as you can see, a lot of these stories are going to start sounding very similar, okay? Where the North and the South Pole have holes. You can travel through them. They have ancient evolved species living there. They may have moved there at the time of Atlantis being destroyed. They have probably always been there, and they are incredibly friendly. Finally, let's get to Admiral Byrd's story. And then after that, we have to talk about Hitler. Of all the figures that we're going to cover, Admiral Byrd is probably the most popular of all of them. This man was incredibly accomplished. He has been written up in National Geographic. And if you just Google his name, you're going to see government docs because he went to Antarctica more than once. You'll see his journeys across other places that he went to just based on the National Geographic. And this story that I'm going to tell you is based on his flight logs, which he took copious notes on, but he hid when he came back because he was afraid of persecution. He told this story in a book on his deathbed. Okay, what I'm going to read you is from both Admiral Byrd's journal logs and his journal and his flight logs. Okay, so it starts off by saying, we are crossing over the small mountain range, still proceeding northward. Beyond the mountain range is what appears to be a small river. There should be no green valley here. Something is definitely wrong and abnormal here. We should be over ice and snow. From the port side, there are great forests growing on the mountainside. The instruments are still spinning. The gyroscope is oscillating back and forth. I alter the altitude to 1,400 feet and execute a sharp left turn. The light here seems different. I cannot see the sun anymore. We make another left turn and spot what seems to be a large animal of some kind below. It looks like a mammoth-like animal. This is incredible. There it is. Temperature indicator reads 74 degrees. Continue our heading. Navigation instruments seem normal now. Radio is not functioning. The countryside is more level than normal. Ahead, we spot what seem like habitations. This is impossible. Aircraft seems light and oddly buoyant. The controls refuse to respond. The engines of our craft have stopped running. The landing process is beginning. I am making a hasty last entry in the flight log. I do not know what is going to happen now. After he confirms that with binoculars at 1,000 feet that he sees the mammoth-like animal, and then he talks about seeing the countryside, he goes offline. And this is where he starts his journal post. The controls refuse to respond. My God, off our port and starboard, wings is a strange type of aircraft. They are closing rapidly alongside. They are disc-shaped and have a radiant quality to them. They are close enough now to see the markings on them. Is it a type of a swastika? This is fantastic. Where are we? What has happened? I tug at the controls again. They will not respond. We are caught in an invisible vice grip of some kind. Our radio crackles and a voice comes through in English with what perhaps is a slight Nordic or Germanic accent? The message is, welcome, Admiral, to our domain. We shall land you in exactly 7 minutes. Relax, Admiral, you are in good hands. I note the engines of our planes have stopped running. The aircraft is under some strange controls and now turning itself. The controls are useless after being forced down. The Admiral and his radio man are taken by several tall, blonde-haired men to a nearby city that seems to be made of a crystalline material of some kind. In this city, Byrd is taken before the master, a man with delicate features and the etching of years upon his face. The master tells Admiral Byrd that he is now in the domain of the Ariani, the inner world of the earth. Our master tells Admiral Byrd, our interests rightly begin just after your race exploded the first atomic bomb over Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Japan, the master says. It was at the alarming time we sent our flying machines to your surface world to investigate what your race has done. You see, we have never interfered before in your race's wars and barbarity, but now we must. For you have learned to tamper with a certain power that is not for man, namely that of atomic energy. Our emissaries have already delivered messages to the powers of your world, and yet they do not heed. Now you have chosen to be witness here that our world does exist. Byrd, at this point, interrupts and asks what this has to do with him. The master tells him that the human race has now reached a point of no return and that there are those who would destroy the world rather than relinquish their power as they know it. In 1945 and afterward, we tried to contact your race, but our efforts were met with hostility. Our Flugerods, that's the name of the flying machines, were fired upon. Yes, even pursued with malice and animosity by your fighter plane. So now I say to you, my son, there is a great storm gathering in your world, a black fury that will not spend itself for many years. There will be no answer in your arms. There will be no safety in your science. It may rage on until every flower of your culture is trampled and all human things are leveled in vast chaos. Your recent war was only a prelude of what is to come for your race. The Admiral is told that the coming dark ages will cover the earth like a pall, but that there will be some that will survive. At that point, the inhabitants of the inner earth will come forward to help revive the human race and assist in heralding in a new age of culture and science. With this message to be delivered to all mankind, Admiral Byrd and his radio man are taken to their plane and escorted back into the air by the flying saucers called Flugerods. By 220 hours, the two men have reestablished radio communications and they land with no troubles at their base camp. The diary ends with Byrd's statement that after meeting at the Pentagon, he is ordered to never mention his experience or anything about this experience ever again. Whew. Okay, this is part 3. This is myths about Antarctica. Before we go on to 2 more accounts, we got to talk about Hitler and then we got to talk about Telos, an account that comes from 2021. But let's talk about the myths in Antarctica. Again, I'm telling you, I'm always watching Gaia Cosmic Disclosure, okay? And they talk about Antarctica a lot. And there are a couple things that we need to cover here. 1, there are supposed to be pyramid-like structures on Antarctica. 2, they talk about having found alien-like bodies in the ice that are used like avatars, where an ancient species, these are bases, alien bases, where an ancient species could bring their consciousness into these actual avatars to maybe do work in Antarctica, because this used to be a really heavy spot. Every government has a base in Antarctica, and they all have an agreement of this land is like a neutral territory. Often they talk about this concept of interdimensionality. I'm going to put this here. And this idea that depending on your energetic state, you might not be in a position to see or witness these dimensional societies because they exist on Earth, yet another dimension. So I don't know what that means, is if you can't get to it because it's like a portal. But even Mount Shasta is said to have another Mount Shasta reversed in another dimension on top of it. And that is where the societies really lie. So when he talks about the idea that they are coming back to the Earth's surface at some point to retrain society, I am going to tie this theory up later, but I think it has a lot to do with this Earth shift that we have heard time and time again, that there are going to be 2 Earths, and that some people, because they have elevated their consciousness to the next level of evolution, will be allowed to interact with and potentially live in this second Earth that is actually within our current Earth. And some may stay on the surface. Now, was Hitler in Antarctica? That's what we're going to talk about next. And I came across this story I'm going to read to you. Now, I'm saying this because he mentioned that there were swastikas on the actual craft. And the theory that is running is that Hitler saw this and became motivated by what he saw in a negative way. And this says, I'm reading this from CaptainAntarctica.com. A long-standing and pervasive conspiracy is that the Nazi UFO base there's a Nazi UFO base in Antarctica. The Nazis went to Antarctica to look for possible sites for submarine bases just before the outbreak of World War II. In their search, they stumbled across ice caverns that led to a meeting with a reptilian race of aliens with advanced technology. They built their own base there, and combining alien technology with German science led to the developments of Germany's advanced aircraft, including the end of the war some saucer-based designs. When Germany lost the war, Hitler and many of his followers, along with Nazi treasures, fled Germany in 2 submarines and settled into their Antarctic base. These are all conspiracy theories. The Americans supposedly discovered the base in the 1946-1947 Operation High Jump, which is what one of our eyewitness stories came from, under the command of Admiral Richard E. Byrd, who was sent to destroy the Navy base. Now, during Operation High Jump, this is well known. Operation High Jump was the first discovery, I think, that they recognized something going on in Antarctica. And this was a big deal because they said that they sent soldiers there and not a lot of them came back. Something happened. And they said at the time that there was some malfunction, I believe. This report says that it was the Nazis who actually attacked these open craft, okay, these craft by the United States, and this is what they're theorizing. Operation High Jump was to test military operations in extreme cold and set up an American base on Antarctica, Little America. It was at the height of the Cold War, and Antarctica was a great opportunity to test their men and their equipment without the risk of the confrontation with the Soviet Union. One ship did go to the area where the German base was supposed to be, present-day Queen Maud Land, but only landed twice for a day and left. All up, Operation High Jump only lost 1 aircraft in a blizzard. After they completed their mission, they returned home. Conspiracy theories often claim that they returned early, driven off by the Nazis, but the reality was that they actually left the USA late in the season and had limited time available. This is the story that they're telling. So literally, Operation High Jump was them going to see if there were Nazi bases potentially on Antarctica and to establish their own base. And they may have had to fight with the Nazis while they were there, and they knew that the Nazis were there. This idea isn't so far off as you think. To be fair, a secret Nazi base is actually plausible. Because in 2016, the Russians discovered a secret Nazi base on Alexandra Island in the Arctic, about 1,000 kilometers from the North Pole. And it was set up in 1942 by Hitler. I feel like this is a good place to stop and say that there are supposedly more than one alien being, again, in the inner earth. And if they met with an advanced society, it may not have been the same people that these other people met with, because this is where many other alien species, I have a whole series coming on this, potentially draconians exist in the inner earth and have been working with government maliciously, I think, about weapons and technology. And Hitler may have been one of the first to discover and start working with ancient species to try to take over the world. Now, my last eyewitness account comes from Gaia, from this show that usually features channelers. I have the show here, and this is an eyewitness account by this guy that you see, and this is in California. So around, I'm going to summarize this up for you. And around 2020, he went to Mount Shasta. He's a spiritual guy. He went to Mount Shasta. He sees this man. I'm going to let him tell you.
I was finished with that. I thought I'm going to sit here for a while. The sun was kind of over my head, and my back was against the rock. And on the rock was this brush that grows there. It was kind of dried out, so I mean, this was not soft at all. Right. But I was having some water and grapes, and I was listening to tunes on my phone. Yeah. Power button down. I sense almost like a shadow that was coming from behind me, like the sun would be, moving quickly enough to shadow you, but also like an environment coming from beneath me. And as soon as I tried to regulate that idea, I felt something cool from behind me. Now I turn around and there's a hole behind me.
Why was there before?
There was nothing behind me. I was leaned up against solid surface. It is large enough. I'm 6 feet tall. It was probably another couple feet over me. It looked like it had been carved out like it was an outside exposure for a volcanic tube. off on the left-hand side to me and maybe 30 yards from where I was, there was somebody. And if I had to guess, it would look like that was somebody who was like my size. The next thing I heard was, would you like to see Telos? My heart raced a little.
Did you know it was coming from that guy, or where did you hear it?
It came from that direction.
Okay.
So I assumed
It was that guy, yeah.
it was that guy. Yeah, I'm nowhere near any. If I had to describe him, he was Scandinavian in look. But they're all of them that I saw had complexions that were like flawless. And they
What does that
they
mean?
weren't long.
Like
You know how we look when we mature? Your skin begins to just change with age.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Flawless.
The wrinkles start creeping in and that kind of thing. And
Yeah,
they
no
didn't have
wrinkles.
that?
No.
Huh.
All of them that I saw.
Wow.
We'll get to Adama and the women that I saw.
Yeah.
None of just flawless. And it makes you wonder. He just had a narrative that helped educate me during this whole process, which is how I learned what I learned while I was there.
Okay.
But what I saw was the magnificent part, and that's why I wish that there was some kind of cinematic thing I could download that everyone else could see what's already here, that we've talked about, and nobody has had any feet on the ground. This was not a meditative journey, me sitting in that spot outside.
Right.
You asked the question, so I'll cover it now.
Yeah.
Both here, now that you mentioned it, and when I described Telos itself, anywhere we went, there was no direct sunlight. And somebody asked me yesterday about it, and it didn't occur to me until then. They said, did you see any shadows? And no, I did not see any shadows. So where does like natural sunlight come from? I can only speculate that it's crystal in nature, and it's an energy that just works its way in ways that we're just not meant to understand
And
yet.
it's kind of coming from all directions?
Everywhere. Everything was illuminated. Now, I don't know if that changes during the cycle of a day. I was there for what seemed like hours, but it was more like an hour and 20 minutes. Once I got there, I mean, there's no conception of dimension. Where am I in the scheme of inside the mountain, or am I underground? You know, you flash wonder where that is, but I'm just going to tuck those questions aside until later.
Sure.
Because I just want to absorb what's in the moment, so that I can read. I wanted to say they look like crystal, but I didn't look like that. It certainly wasn't wood, and it wasn't metal, and God knows what it was. Alex got into the left-hand seat of this and gestured for me to sit next to him. And once I sat down, this thing levitated. And we began to move in the direction.
Did it have any give when you sat in it, or was it solid?
It whatever motion it had, and I knew we were moving, it didn't feel like I was going anywhere.
Wow.
So, but I know you're moving. There's no sensation of wind or any of that. The things that you were in that area and it opened up, your breath just is gone, because now you're overseeing level 1 of the city of Telos, and it immediately takes us up to some level, so that in those pictures you've seen of cityscapes, this is what I'm looking at right now. Telos is circular in orientation, so this white pyramid is in the middle of what I'm looking at, and all around it are crystal structures that are just gorgeous.
Could you estimate the size of this pyramid? Like, is it massive, like the Giza pyramid?
It holds allegedly 10,000 people inside of it.
Inside the pyramid alone?
Inside the pyramid.
So
it's their main temple space, although there are smaller temples around that level. This is it.
Wow, so this view you had was just enormous.
Enormous. Chills just went through my body, because look, I believe that. I've been led to believe that the shift in whatever solstice, that the council was, they believe that the shift is imminent. And they believed it was winter solstice.
Okay.
When she said that, chills just went through my body because, look, I believe that. I've been led to believe that the shift in whatever solar flash that might manifest itself in that way, it's coming. Never mind, I believe that I came back in this incarnation because the shift is going to happen in my lifetime.
Now, did she specifically say solar flash, or?
They mentioned that there was going to be some type of phenomenon. And
Okay.
again, I believe in the cyclical nature of the universe
Sure.
and how the cosmos works.
Okay.
And, you know, if you're not paying attention right now, we got bombarded with solar energy from the sun now.
In fact, yesterday and the day before yesterday, we had some major...
And with that, the meeting was done.
Okay.
They stood up and they bowed in my direction and they were off. They accomplished whatever task they needed to be. Looking back at it, I got enough of a view of Telos to see that this is legit. They expressed what they were interested in communicating with me.
Well, you said Adama close. Did he have any closing words?
He just said, he confirmed that they were honored that I would be, he represented the council on this matter. I'm trying to remember the way he said it because it was so elegant.
Yeah.
He represented the council in this matter, and they were all in agreement that the shift was imminent, and that if you were willing to be an emissary when the time came, we would really appreciate it.
What did his voice sound like?
Here's what I think you need to understand. There's a couple of themes that are happening here. One, they talk about the eternal sun being another sun. So we can just like say that that's a thing, right? Two, the monotrail, the railing system that they talk about has been mentioned before and is mentioned again. I have books on Telos and I have a book on the Agartha network. We're going to go over those next, but this is a very common thing that they talk about is like this railroad system. Three, they mention that they are giants, something about the atmosphere, just like they say that the Atlantean beings were much larger. These beings are much larger. For at this specific place, he noticed that they had an etching in crystal in the meeting room that was a design from the store in Mount Shasta. This lady knows them. I'm putting her work here. She's fabulous work, but they hired her pretty much. There is supposed to be some sort of meeting and that they have been preparing for humanity's cataclysm to happen so that they can help save us because it's inevitable and they have been waiting for the right time. Okay. There's so much more to this series. We have to talk about Göbekli Tepe and the cave systems in Turkey. We have to talk about the pole shifts and flooding and the mud floods to really tie up everything. Okay, finally, it's time to talk about Telos and Agartha and much more than that. Okay, so what are these places? These are ancient civilizations. Telos is supposed to be in Mount Shasta, and Agartha is supposed to be near the north-south pole entrances. I'm not quite sure, but it is supposed to be the capital city. Now, there are a ton of interdimensional species living within the earth. These are two of what could be thousands. They say the entire earth is full. And that, again, like you heard in all of this, is that there's like a monorail that runs through it that can get you from one side to the other. Now, here are a couple of things you need to know. These aren't the only openings. There's supposed to be openings all over the world. Even in the United States, the closest is supposed to be in Ohio. Each of these openings are where they can reach us, we can get to them, or where ancient civilizations that have disappeared may have exited to leave and go to inner earth at some point. Now, even at Machu Picchu, there's supposed to be an entrance. Even in the Grand Canyon, there's supposed to be an entrance. And the people of Machu Picchu, for instance, are said to have gone there when they left information about a great cataclysm. That is going to be the finale of this. Why there are beings in the earth that look like us. So again, there are multiple beings supposedly living in the earth. There are supposed to be Draco in the earth, and they work with to facilitate weapons and new technology, because there are UFOs that are not interdimensional, but that belong to the government or whomever. And you can tell because apparently they have seams. If you see a seam on a UFO, it's not real. There are ant people, and I think they look very similar to the Greys. We're doing an entire alien breakdown next, or interdimensional being, again, because they are mostly in Earth and not outside. We are mostly in contact with beings that live here. But there are ant people. There are thousands, okay? Even allegedly trolls, like so many. Why can't we see them? Why don't we, giants, why don't we know they're there? Okay, very good question. This has something to do with dimensions. Something happened on Earth, and the people who decided to stay, I think, went underground, and I think we had a clock reset. Dimensions are based on frequency and resonance. And just like synchronicity is when time and space meet up in the perfect angle, let's say, dimensional realities are based on your core resonance frequency pairing up with that dimension. You and I are in a bubble where space isn't really real. So all of these dimensions are stacked on top of each other, and you only experience the resonance of the dimension that you partake in. Now, a couple of things about that. If you've been paying attention to any spiritual person, you must be if you're here, but you know that we are either fourth dimensional right now, able to traverse the third and the fourth dimension, or potentially fourth dimension going to fifth dimension, or third dimension going to fourth dimension. No one knows. It's somewhere between 3, 4, and 5. I've heard it all over the place. Now, I know because we have a resonance and multidimensional beings have the ability to traverse more than 1, 2, 3, or 4 dimensions. Many of us are cycling through third, fourth, fifth dimension based on our energy patterns throughout the day. To properly engage with these societies, one would need to be able to consistently stay at the resonance of that dimension, which is what this guy even said when he was in the interview of Telos, is that he must have gotten to the proper dimension point. When you start seeing beings, when you start seeing things with your third eye, it usually means that you have traversed dimensions. So our jobs are to get our energy accelerated to the point where these other dimensional beings that want to interact with us can resonate with our frequency so that we can properly engage with them, because you only see the vibrations that fit with your core vibration. Again, there are good things in the earth, and there are bad things in the earth. What some would consider as bad, I think, are just considering their own survival outside of another species, right? We know people like that on Earth. And many of them don't vibe with humans for obvious reasons. We destroyed this Earth. And don't really want us to be interacting with the higher dimensional form, and have potentially been manipulating storylines on Earth to make it go their way. I think I have a little bit more to get out about this. Okay, so another thing that I want you to know about this is, at some point in every book that I read, and again, all of the sources are in the show notes, the Telos book, the Agartha books, there's Telos 1, 2, and 3, have said that they have been preparing humanity for something and getting them ready to bring a group of people who fit the core resonance, so that this isn't about separation of someone or discrimination. It literally is, you wouldn't even be able to see them if you don't fit the core resonance, right? It's just the way the math works. But those people are able to move into this next society. This is what they have been planning for, talking about, we've all been gearing up for. And they have been allegedly really preparing and waiting for the go ahead. Allegedly, there is a ship right above Mount Shasta that's always there. Now, Telos and Agartha are connected. Adamus is supposedly the leader of the whatever it is. Adamus might be Adam for first man. This is based on we're going to talk about who these beings are. The beings being from Atlantis, okay? I know I sound crazy saying all of this. Ugh, I'm gonna keep going. So we've got the ship that's supposedly over Mount Shasta, and obviously there are ships coming and going from both the North and South poles, and additional ships have joined, ready for this transition. Now, both Agartha and Telos are working with the Galactic Federation. We will go over that as we go over all of the alien beings in the next series. But what they say is, time is ticking and something's coming to Earth, and some of us will have to be here to restart the Earth, and some of us will be moving on to the next dimension as we evolve. Now, these are supposed to be the Atlantean beings that when the world flooded, when something happened to the world, they decided, planned, were ready for the ability to move into another dimension to continue to evolve the species. Now, remember, we're all evolving together, so their evolvement helped our evolvement. And some of us who are on Earth right now are awakening to continue that transition, but we're there during the Atlantean times and the first destruction of Earth. Now, this has something to do with pole shifting, which is what we're going to get to in the last section, and what could have happened on Earth and what could be happening again. All right, great people, it's time to land this plane. 15,000 years ago, something happened on Earth, a great cataclysm that heralded in the Ice Age. The ancient beings that I am talking about and this hollow earth theory is supposedly important right now because these species also went through with us this great cataclysm last time. And this is another peak in development. Historians like to believe that prior to 15,000 years ago, our society was filled with hunter-gatherers. What these interdimensional species are saying is that that's not true. Society was much more broken up, but there was Atlantis, there were civilized, highly technical, highly advanced societies happening in certain places, think off the coast of California. And there were also just tribes and other people living all over the earth, okay? When the Great Cataclysm happened, and they said that it was multiple things. One, just like now, this is all cyclical, just like now, tensions were reaching an all-time high. I think there were some hierarchy problems in Atlantis, and two, something was coming to end Earth or was going to hit Earth, and these people were more intelligent than us, so they knew it was happening, like a meteor was coming. Some people thought that they could stop the meteor from happening using advanced technology, even though it was dangerous and erratic, and other people knew that they couldn't and didn't want to tempt fate. They thought this must be time. Time knows better than us. Some advanced beings left Earth. Some went in Earth. Some stayed on Earth with this machine trying to figure it out, and some were just innocent bystanders and didn't know what was going on and didn't or couldn't get out in time. When this cataclysm happened that did herald in the Ice Age, it reset society. When it reset society, there were stations set up around the Earth to rebuild society. To train people on hunter-gatherer techniques. It was like we went back to zero. Okay, to train people how to hunt, how to garden, how to do all of that stuff had to happen again. Before the cataclysm happened, they put up warning signs. So when you see that calendar in Machu Picchu talking about 2012, that was the beginning of the shift. This is what I'm going to show you next. It's Göbekli Tepe. This is an ancient site that was found in Turkey. This site is supposed to be one of the most ancient sites in Mesopotamia around 15,000 years ago that was intentionally buried on purpose to leave a message for mankind in case of some sort of disaster. Watch this.
That the stone structures could be as much as 12,000 years old, more than 5,000 years older than mankind's first known civilization in Mesopotamia. More than that, it would place the construction of Göbekli Tepe to a time when mainstream scholars suggest humans were roaming the Earth as hunter-gatherers.
Well, the sight of Göbekli Tepe really did send shockwaves through the whole world of early prehistory, because we'd never before known or imagined even that simple hunter-gatherers could produce such spectacular monumental structures. Now, in archaeology, really since it began, we've always assumed that hunter-gatherers were capable of producing wonderful works of art, rock art, cave art, and things like that.
The currently accepted timeline for mankind's advancement is correct. Is it possible that primitive hunter-gatherers could have built such sophisticated megalithic structures? Ancient astronaut theorists say no, and instead suggest that Göbekli Tepe was built by the survivors of a lost society, one that was almost entirely wiped out by a worldwide cataclysm. And to support their claim, they point to recent evidence of a catastrophic event which many mainstream scientists believe occurred at the very end of the last ice age, which is believed to have lasted from roughly 108,000 BC until nearly 10,000 BC.
Why is this important? This was one of the first things that alerted scientists that clearly there was a more advanced society here than just hunter-gatherers. Whoever built this site knew what the hell they were doing. Allegedly, these sites, just like the pyramids, align towards Sirius or the Orion star. Don't quote me on this. I think it's Sirius. And that it's got something to do with also the way that the constellations go around, that they use the constellations to time these cataclysms. The people who came to see the planet again may have been part of the 144,000 that we've talked about, to come back and to bring humanity back up to speed. And we taught these lessons. Some of us came back and forgot. Some of us have evolved and done many jobs on Earth since then. This is important to know, because if there is something that is showing a calendar match, then it's something we have to pay attention to. And this is what they have been saying, is that this thing is going to happen again. The cycle is like we've reached another level of evolution, and this cycle has peaked. And the people who have evolved to this next dimensional reality are ready to move on to the next level. And the people who are not will have to reset on Earth, and we have to try again, because we keep getting it wrong. And we are reversing timelines here. That is what we're really doing, because all time exists right now. We've lived these lives before. We've done some part of these tasks before, and we're trying to clean everything up. Now, just 300 miles away from this ancient site, you have these freaking beautifully carved, 300 feet in the ground cave systems. And we're going to watch something about that next.
300 miles from the ancient site of Göbekli Tepe, December 28, 2014. A local crew excavating for an urban renovation project stumbles across a strange series of carved rooms and tunnels deep underground. Upon further exploration, they find the subterranean network spans several miles and extends hundreds of feet below the surface of the Earth, much like the nearby caves of Derinkuyu.
What they discovered was that these caves extended for a distance of 370 feet down into the rock.
Archaeologists estimate that more than 5 million square feet of rock, the volume of over 370 Olympic-sized swimming pools, was removed to carve out this subterranean city. Yet there is no evidence of the extracted material in the area. This mysterious
1,000 people, perhaps even as much as 60,000, could have lived here at any one time.
Not only is there evidence that these caves once housed thousands of people, but archaeologists have found air vents and water wells that would have made it possible to live underground for years at a time.
These were cut deeply into the rock, sometimes for hundreds of yards in depth. And at the base of them were wells that provided water to these underground populations. This is what is known as a self-sealing door. And they're in fact huge great stone wheels.
Okay. I think these are the cave systems that some of the people who were escaping before the Ice Age, or people who potentially couldn't make it all the way out of the cataclysm and needed to shield themselves for a while prior to continuing on, I think they were here, guys. And these cave systems go for miles long and connect to other cave systems that could connect to the inner earth. Not only that, here's something else you need to know. There are supposedly, I think I told you this in the last one, but there's supposed to be openings all over the place, okay? It's not in a bubble. What if this is what happened and we are reaching the next level of evolution, and within these circumstances, to exist in a new type of world, we might have to, instead of the earth being a shift that they talk about where it's two earths splitting, what if it literally, it's a mind shift where we go into this another version of, or this other layer of earth, and people are still on the outside on another layer of earth, and that's the two layers. That was my first theory. And then I get so bogged down by this concept that someone's gonna be left behind, because it runs into like too Christian for me. And then I think about if this cataclysm happened before, and some people went to evolve the species, and some people sacrificed themselves, and we are a group of people, some of us who are watching this are aware, and a group of people who sacrificed themselves, then it's just a natural progress in evolution for some people to have to do the same rhythm and become awake within that process. I don't know. This was really fun. It was like giving birth. This was a lot, okay? I hope you enjoyed this series. Please like, subscribe. I'm Candace. I own Louise Skincare. We do skincare, herbal remedies, and spiritual discovery. And this is just my odd obsession that I cannot let go of. What do you think about the Hollow Earth? Do you think it exists? Have you been to Mount Shasta? And are you going? That's what I have for you. Thanks so much, guys, for going on this journey with me.